Zoom. So Jennifer, all you.
Great. So this is the CWA panel on humor in hard times, and we'll be starting in just a few minutes. I'm Jennifer Fluri. I'm a professor in the geography department at CU Boulder, and my research focuses on gender, geopolitics, and development in Afghanistan. And I also have written, co-edited a special issue in political geography on humor and geopolitics. And I write also about the use of humor as a coping strategy in Afghanistan. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes for everyone to be ready for our panel to start at 2 o'clock. And then I will be introducing each of the panelists, and then they will, once I introduce them, they'll speak a little bit about their work for about 5 to 7 minutes. And then we will have a discussion among the panelists. And then after that, we'll be taking questions from the audience, which I will have on my computer. And then I will be, I'll state each of the questions and then allow the panelists to choose who will answer them. So just one more minute. And again, this is the CWA panel on humor in hard times. And we will be starting shortly.
Quick question?
Yes.
So I heard you say speaking about our work, which that's very easy to do. I hadn't heard it put quite so succinctly. So, all right, great. I'll stay away from the theoretical and focus on the practical. That's great.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure, no problem. So we're looking forward to having a lot of laughter during this session as well. So keep it funny.
Oh dear.
Yeah, no pressure. No pressure.
Yeah.
None of us are comedians.
Yeah, right. Well, you that can all change today. Okay, so now that it's 2 o'clock, I'd like to welcome everyone again. This is the CWA panel on humor in hard times. Again, my name is Jennifer Fluri, and I'm a professor in the geography department at CU Boulder. And my research is focused on Afghanistan, and I've written about humor and conflict, particularly in Afghanistan. And so I'd like to start out by introducing our panelists, and I'll introduce each one, and then after I introduce them, they'll give a little overview about themselves as well. So our first panelist is Mark Stewart, who's a multi-instrumentalist, composer, singer, and instrument designer. He has been heard around the world performing old and new music. Since 1998, he has recorded, toured, and been musical director with Paul Simon. He's a founding member of the Bang on a Can All-Stars, the comic duo Polygraph Lounge with keyboardist Rob Schwimmer. He has also worked extensively with composer Elliot Goldenthal on music for films such as Midsummer Night's Dream, The Tempest, and Across the Universe, and more, often playing instruments of his own design and construction. He designed instruments for Julie Taymor's Midsummer Night's Dream. He's the inventor of the Whirlycopter, a bicycle-powered Pythagorean choir of singing tubes, and the Big Boing, a 24-foot sonic banquet table that seats 30 children playing 490 found objects. He is the founder of Sound Stewart, designing immersive, interactive musical instrument environments, I should say, for museums, community centers, and outdoor spaces of all kinds. He is also a visiting lecturer in musical instrument design and collective improvisation at MIT. So take it away, Mark.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. And we're here to talk about humor in hard times. And we certainly are in hard times, and we all need humor. So I think all of us have thought about this, and I'll tell you about the way I've thought about it first. You heard from my biographical description that I spent a lot of time playing serious music, and I've devoted a lot of time and energy to learning how to play music seriously. But grew up with a father with a big funny bone and inherited that funny bone. About 25 years ago, I ran into a fellow musician who had the same basic qualities, a very serious musician, very funny guy. So that's Polygraph Lounge. We started making the combination of mirth and music in the spirit of the original great Spike Jones and his City Slickers back from the 40s and the 50s. We're very serious about being completely ridiculous. Well, we had a big following in New York. We had a lot of fun, but we discovered something rather remarkable in 2 weeks after September 11th, 2001, when we essentially our fans in New York were begging us to do a show. And we kept on saying, it's too soon, it's too soon. What's there to laugh about? What's there to laugh about? And they just said, we need to laugh. We need to laugh. So Rob and I took it on seriously. We designed a set that was our most ridiculous set to date. What did I write down? It was escapist lunacy and poignant mirth. And indeed it was. And we played it at CBGB's and at that storied rock club. And the place was packed and people cried and wet their pants. Everyone needed to do both, you know, in equal measure. And at the end of it, we looked at each other and, you know, and when we dried our eyes, we said, well, that was some necessary art. So I want to speak a little bit about that idea, the idea of necessary art, and describe what I think that can be in this case, looking at it through the lens of hard times and humor. And then finish with a song I've written for the occasion or rewritten for the occasion. And I'm going to ask my fellow panelists to sing along at the points that make sense. And you can do that too, you who are watching. So necessary art. Humor in art, humor aligned with art often heightens its necessary nature in all times. And you ask yourself why? Well, because humor is a necessary food group rich in a wide variety of nutrients. And those nutrients are in short supply right now in these hard times. So we need supplements to maintain the balance. Tragedy and comedy are not strange bedfellows at all. In fact, they go together, the yin and the yang, constantly. So E.B. White once said, the analysis of humor is like dissecting a frog. That is, it can be done, but the frog tends to die in the process. So I think E.B. White was right, and that's why when someone says, "Why was that joke funny?" and you describe it, there's no big laugh that happens. They just, oh yeah, that's right, you know. But in this case, I'm going to do a little analysis, and then I'm going to sing the song. So, how do you answer that? It's too soon. Well, there's no such thing as too soon when it comes to humor, but good taste. The questions of taste, questions of brow, low brow, middle brow, high brow. Those are the questions that in Polygraph Lounge we try and answer all the time. We're unibrow, where we embrace, where we love to be as erudite as we want to be, and we're not above a good fart joke. So it's got to be in the right spot, and the fart has to be in tune. Ya-da-da-da-da-da, you know, right there, good rhythm. So how do you put across humor in hard times? Well, what we did is we got as silly as we could get, because silliness needs no justification. We talk about two kinds of baloney. There's justified baloney, where everyone understands, oh, they're being crazy for this reason. But our favorite is unjustified baloney. So, and that's when silliness can be elevated to necessary art. So rhyming is always a joy. We love to rhyme, and I'm going to rhyme for you soon, and you will join at a certain point. And I'll make these words available so we can all sing them, because they're very true right now, and you'll know the song. Be it a song or a sonnet. Also, if you're teaching while you're mirth making, you know, and that doesn't mean you're preaching. It means you're teaching. You're teaching what you have to offer. Okay, let's see. What is there anything else I want to say before I do this? This is the Zaphoon. It's going to be my little buddy, and it sounds like this. Didn't need no homemade mask. On the beach, we all would bask. For personal space, you had to ask. Those were the days. Zoom was what you did in cars. Close friends are now from afars. Hazmat suits were worn on Mars. Those were the days. Never thought to stockpile hams, bags of beans and cans of clams. And you knew that latex gloves were just for annual exams. Never sterilized doorknobs or had to sanitize key fobs. Drive-ins weren't for nasal swabs. Everybody, those were the days.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. That was wonderful. Appreciate your time and love the song. So next in our panel, we have Lisa Graves, and she is co-director of Documented in Washington, D.C. She is the president of a new watchdog group, True North Research, and a researcher, writer, and speaker who has appeared on MSNBC, NBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, CNBC, BBC, C-SPAN, Democracy Now!, among other news shows. She served as chief counsel for nominations on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Legal Policy, Deputy Chief of the Article III Judges Division for the U.S. Courts, and in other posts. She was president of the board of directors of the Center for Media and Democracy. She's also been featured in several documentary films, including The 13th, The United States of Alec, and Rest in Power, The Trayvon Martin Story, among other films. She has testified to the House and Senate and edited briefs submitted to the U.S. Supreme Court. So welcome, Lisa. I'm so happy to have you here, and take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. I just wanted to say hello to everyone. It's a joy to be on, and I know my resume doesn't sound like I might be funny, but I think I might be funny. I hope that you'll find some humor in this. One of the things that I thought I would begin with is just putting this in context, how the world has changed in nearly 20 years. I was flying from Tokyo to Los Angeles on September 11th, and at some point the flight attendant said that the United States was closed. And at the time I was sort of shocked. We didn't know what had happened. And I thought, you know, the United States never closes. We're like Vegas, you know, 24 hours a day. Of course, we learned that that day we weren't like Vegas, and it was a terrible tragedy to have those terrorist attacks on our country. And humor certainly helped, humor and solidarity helped people get through those dark times. And so I'm honored to be here today to help hopefully bring some humor to these dark times. I thought I would tell you that perhaps since you saw me last year, some things have changed. I'm a co-founder of Documented. I started this new watchdog group. But more importantly, for your purposes, Trump has made me a believer in things I never thought were possible, things that I thought were actually quite impossible. For example, I now know for certain that George W. Bush was not the worst president in US history. That has become, you know, painfully clear to me. I also have, you know, renewed or new, actually, appreciation for Dick Cheney. I would tell you in my personal capacity that if there were a vote held today, perhaps by absentee ballot, but today, and the contest were to vote for Trump or Dick Cheney, I would vote for Dick Cheney without even hesitating. I can't even believe that I can believe that now. Same goes for Mitt Romney. I was not a fan of his before, but I was proud of him for, you know, standing up to this president during the impeachment trial. And so, you know, Trump really has made me believe things that I never thought were possible. But I have to tell you that I'm really tired of this reality TV world that we're experiencing. I sort of blame Mark Burnett. Now, I say that because he helped launch Trump's Apprentice show after Trump dallied about, you know, nearly 20 years ago with running as the candidate for the Reform Party. And even though I'm a big fan of Survivor, I am not a big fan of this version of Survivor that we're in the middle of right now. And I think that the fact that Trump was so used to performing on a set with this boardroom and this whole setup sort of explains the things that are unexplainable in a normal environment, a non-reality TV environment, where you could have a president talking about his ratings being so high during this crisis in which so many Americans are falling ill and getting sick and dying. That's sort of the only thing that explains it. There are other things, you know, like that I'll leave to psychologists, but his obsession with ratings right now is, I think, a function of that. When you look at this patchwork of closures we see around the country, I think it was Rachel Maddow who said, not closing some places while closing others is a bit like having a cordoned off area in a swimming pool where people can pee. You know, it just doesn't really work that way. And that's why we need to have a sensible plan for our country, which we don't entirely have right now with this guy at the helm. Instead, we have this situation in which Trump seems to think that the goods that America has accumulated for this crisis are sort of like his baubles to give to people that he likes most and to criticize governors he likes least. I think we really need a big rethink about the purpose of government, the role of government, and the role of leaders. That's not very funny, I have to admit, but I have to say it's really sort of startling to me to see any president of any party standing up at the stage, basically acting as though he's giving out his personal goods to states based on how nice the governors are to him. That's just not the American way. It's just not the way we need to operate. And then, you know, there are other things about Trump that, again, I believe things that I never believed were possible. When he said on the campaign trail that we were just going to win so much, we'd be so tired of winning. I really did not think that was going to happen, but I will tell you, and you're probably in the same boat as me, that I'm pretty tired of winning the race to have the most infections of COVID-19. I don't want to be number one. It's terrible that we're number one. You know, there are some things I can take some comfort in. You know, Trump has been pushing the anti-malaria drug, chloroquine. You know, and he has a history of promoting vitamins from his Trump brand that were, you know, discredited by health experts. So I suppose I should take comfort that he's just promoting chloroquine and not laxatives. I know that's a terrible joke. Is it too soon? Is it too soon? It may be too soon. The reality is that the truth is stranger than fiction. Just this past week, a week ago, Charles Koch, the billionaire, one of the richest billionaires in the world, had an op-ed in which he touted how he'd given $5 million to COVID relief. That's a lot of money to me, probably people like you and me both. But then when I did the math, it's like 0.000125 of his wealth of nearly $40 billion. So I hope that you all can get an op-ed anytime you give $5. If you make like $40,000 a year, that'd be awesome. We could have great op-eds about our fabulous charity work for $5 in a year. But anyway, I'm gonna bring this home with a couple of just last quick points, Jennifer. One is, you know, this whole situation here in Wisconsin, where I'm at, has been a disaster with the election and the Wisconsin Supreme Court and US Supreme Court going ahead with the election over the objections of the governor. And you sort of learn in this environment in close quarters habits of the people in your family. So I've been the person who's been trying to keep everything safe, you know, guarding the mail, making sure that we're protected. And my husband has been helping, but I went to mail in my ballot, and as I licked the envelope, my husband was over at the kitchen sink wiping his envelope down with water, and I thought, oh, I've got much to learn. Of course, my husband's been very patient in this whole process because, you know, this is my bedroom. Our home is our new workplace, and, you know, he really opposes these rules against sex in the workplace. Anyway, on a final note, that's a joke, really it is. On a final note, I just want to tell you a little funny story that was funny to me. Back in the middle of the Patriot Act fight, I was lobbying Congress to get some reforms in the Patriot Act, and Senator Reid was then the leader on the floor of the Senate, and we finally stopped for a moment the Patriot Act from going forward. So the next day, I hadn't been in the grocery store for a long time. I went to Trader Joe's. I put on a t-shirt that I usually don't wear shirts with writing on them, Not that I'm opposed to that for others, but I had a t-shirt on that said, "Stop bitching and start a revolution." And I put my little hoodie on. I went to Trader Joe's and I saw Senator Reid and he said, "Lisa." And I said, "Senator Reid, thank you so much for trying to get these patriot reforms." And he said, "I really appreciate it." In the middle of our conversation, his wife came up and interrupted him and sort of grabbed him by the arm and walked him away from me. And I thought, well, that was weird. And I looked down and my t-shirt with the hoodie had stopped saying "stop bitching and start a revolution." It had kind of curved under my bosom. Instead, it just said "top bitch." And I thought, that is not the image I really want to convey to the Senate or the senators. And so I zipped my hoodie up and I was lamenting to my friend that this had happened. And she said, "But Lisa, you are the top bitch." So hello from Wisconsin. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lisa. That was wonderful. Appreciate. And I think, although it may not sound like what you do is funny, you clearly are very funny and see humor in very serious issues. So thank you so much for that. And next on our panel is Mike Reiss, who is an Emmy award-winning writer and producer of The Simpsons, which is one of my husband's favorite shows. So he has won 4 Emmys and a Peabody Award during his 28 years writing for The Simpsons. And he ran the show in season 4, which Entertainment Weekly called, quote, "the greatest season of the greatest show in history," end quote. In 2006, Reiss received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Animation Writers Caucus. He's written 20 children's books, as well as Springfield Confidential, a best-selling memoir about his 3 decades at The Simpsons. He's written jokes for comedy legends such as Johnny Carson, Joan Rivers, Gary Shandling, and Pope Francis for his comedic contributions to the charitable group Joke with the Pope. Pope Francis declared Reiss, quote unquote, "a missionary of joy." He's also a celebrated playwright and has won several awards for his plays. And he's been happily married for 30 years. And like most children's book authors, he has no children. Thank you so much for being here, and take it away, Mike.
Oh, hi. I didn't mean to talk about this, but I'll clarify right at the top that Pope story is true. I was on the Pope. The Pope threw a party. He didn't show up. It was in New York, but he threw a party for his charity, and it was such a lavish party. And I never saw so many drunken nuns in my life. And I was drunk too, and at the end of the night, I didn't know this was coming, and they presented me with this award signed by Pope Francis, saying, declaring me a missionary of joy. And I get up and I say, well, this is not the first time a priest has put a man in the missionary position. And so this is just to show you, yes, you can say about anything. I haven't been asked back to the Vatican. Anyway, I am reporting here today from the epicenter. I'm in New York City right now. Everything's fine. And it reminds me of the night after 9/11. The night after 9/11 occurred, 2001, Jay Leno came out on The Tonight Show and he said, well, I'm going to do my show tonight, but I'm not going to be funny. And that is a vow he kept for the next 15 years. Yeah, he sucks. So, but that was it. Those were really troubled, terrible times. Of course, we all remember it. And you would see editorials everywhere wondering, can we ever be funny again? Can there be comedy after this? And the answer, of course, is yes. But nobody was quite sure at the time. But you only had to look back in time. And you had to go from Leno back to Lenny Bruce, because he had to do a show the night after JFK was shot. And the crowds packed the nightclub to hear what was Lenny Bruce going to say to be funny about the JFK assassination. And he came out and there was a long pause and he said, Vaughn Meter is so screwed. Now, I'm going to have to wreck that joke by explaining it to most people. Vaughn Meter was a comedian at the time with Lenny Bruce, a contemporary, who made a fortune imitating JFK. And that, November 22nd was not just the death of Kennedy, it was the death of Vaughn Meter's career. And so Lenny Bruce had found a great way to find comedy, and it's sort of a great trick, which is when you have a giant tragedy, to look at a very small tragedy associated with it. Anyway, the point being just that, yes, there is comedy in all things. And in fact, bad times are really good for good comedy. We see it on The Simpsons. We see it all the time. You know, The Simpsons, we all know the quality of the show tends to go up and down. And every once in a while, we do a bad decade. But the crazier the world gets, the better our show gets. And in fact, in 2001, in the year of 9/11, that was the year The Simpsons won the Emmy for Best Animated Show. And this is, again, not a joke. Donald Trump, I think, was elected on November 8th, 2016. And on November 9th, Fox called us up and said, we're renewing your show for 2 more years. So they knew there was comedy there. So it just shows Donald Trump really is a job creator, at least for me. Yes, bad times make for good comedy. You know, do you look at the 1960s when America had riots at home and a war overseas? And this is the era that very much gave birth to George Carlin and Richard Pryor and the Marx Brothers. The Marx Brothers came right out of the Great Depression. And in fact, the whole Jewish sensibility came out of the 19th century European persecution and ghettoization of the Jews. You know, everybody thinks the Jews, my people, they're funny. Jews think that too. We're just funny people. But it's an amazing fact that Jewish people really weren't funny until the 19th century. And if you don't believe me, read the Old Testament. The Old Testament is unique among holy books in that there is not one joke in the entire Old Testament. There's jokes in the Quran. There's even pretty good jokes in the Quran, but none in the Old Testament. Anyway, being Jewish, of course, I can't go 7 minutes without mentioning the Holocaust. And again, there's been great comedy to come out of pretty much the worst thing that ever happened in history. Charlie Chaplin found comedy in Hitler. Mel Brooks has made a career of it. Roberto Benigni won Oscars with Life is Beautiful, finding humor in the Holocaust. It's so ingrained in our culture that when I saw Jojo Rabbit this year, I really thought, oh, not another funny Hitler. But the best example of this, of course, is Mel Brooks and The Producers. The Producers, a great movie. He won an Oscar for that. The musical won more Tonys than any musical in history. And then it became the highest grossing musical comedy of all time in Germany. In Germany. I mean, that proves more than anything else the old adage that tragedy plus time equals comedy. You know, you wait long enough, the worst things can be funny. Now, that's not true among comedians and comedy writers. You don't even need the time. It's just tragedy equals comedy. I've seen it myself at The Simpsons. I've been there for a lot of national tragedies and personal tragedies. When a cast member or some worker at the show dies, there's a respectful nanosecond of silence, and then the jokes start. And I was very relieved to hear Steve Harvey say the same thing on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. He just said, there is humor in everything. Comedians know that they can go for it right away. And that's the difference between comedians and kind of regular sane people, is they know the humor's there, but sometimes they have to wait for the public to catch up. Anyway, I found in this current situation we're in, I found the humor in it on Twitter. I'm on Twitter every day. I don't do it to promote a political cause. I never show you a photograph of what I'm eating or a cat or anything like that. All I do is I use it as an exercise. I try to give the public one good joke a day, just like the Jimmy Fallon show. But I one good joke a day. And it was January. I said, I wonder if I can make a joke about the coronavirus. I wonder if I can do it. It was new back then. It was just hitting America, President Trump and Fox News were still denying it. Those people we have to celebrate our last responders, the last guys who found out things were going wrong. But I wondered if I could make a joke about it. And it was a very mild joke where I said, whenever this thing is over, I am never washing my hands again. And but so I did what a coward does on Twitter. I put the joke on Twitter, and then I just watched the feed for the next 6 hours to see, did people complain? Did I lose followers? And the fact is, no, everybody was ready to laugh about coronavirus. Now, you got to be smart. You got to know, no, it's not funny that people are dying. It's not funny that people can't get ventilators. But the way Trump acts on a daily basis, yeah, that has been funny. And Americans cooped up in their house wearing sweatpants every day, that's funny. And the fact that people are hoarding toilet paper, well, that's hilarious. If there's one takeaway you get from this seminar today, it's anything with toilet paper is hilarious. So since that time, I've been on Twitter. I'm pretty much just the pure coronavirus comedian. I give you 2 or 3 good jokes a day about coronavirus. I hope you'll follow me. I'm at Mike Reiss Writer. Mike, last name Reiss, R-E-I-S-S, and then Writer, just because that's what I think I am. So it's Mike Reiss Writer. And what I have found about this is not only are people willing to laugh at this situation, they're willing to go pretty dark. I'll just give you a couple of jokes that I've written that people really like. These have gotten the best response. One is Fox News reports that between 200,000 and 1 million people will die in America due to Hillary Clinton's emails. Then this one's super dark. This is just today. You can see I just posted this today. People really went for it, which was, I won't believe America is back to normal until there's a mass shooting. And but let me show you, this is the joke people really sparked to most of all. Most popular tweet I ever wrote, even though super dark, even though it invokes death, even though it invokes Hitler, you don't have, I know you're out there, I can hear you gasping for breath. Here's the joke, and it's unfair to compare Trump to Hitler, but they both seem pretty eager to kill my grandparents. Wow. Anyway, that's my talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike. That was very funny and wonderful, and appreciate adding in the gallows humor along with regular political humor. So I appreciate that. Next on our panel is Seth Shostak, who is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And he has written over 600 popular articles on astronomy, film, technology, and other topics. He has also, and these are his words, assaulted the public with 3 inoffensive trade books on the efforts by scientists to prove that we're not alone in the universe. With a Boulder-based co-author, he has written a textbook that he claims, with little evidence, has had a modestly positive effect on college students. He also hosts a weekly 1-hour radio show entitled Big Picture Science. His background encompasses such diverse activities as filmmaking, railroading, and computer animation. And he's also a frequent lecturer and soundbite pundit on television shows and radio. So take it away, Seth.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Well, all right, listen, being a scientist kind of type, I thought I would try and investigate something about humor. I mean, if you look up humor to try and find out what it is, what you'll find is that, people define it in terms of playing on incongruities or things that don't make a whole lot of sense. But I mean, the bigger question is, why do we even have it? And, it's something that's hardwired into us. Some people are funnier than others, but I mean, we have it, the bonobos have it, even rats apparently have a sense of humor. So you can go on Amazon and buy a book of rodent humor, I suppose. But let me point out to you something that's obvious. Everything I'm going to say is obvious, actually. And that is, in tough times, and that's the motivation for this particular panel, humor is a great lubricant for society. It kind of, it gets us past some of the most horrific things. I mean, there was a lot of humor in the American Civil War, even though you can't say that there was a lot of stuff to be, make jokes about. And Lincoln's famous phrase was something like, with a fearful strain that is upon me night and day, if I did not laugh, I think I would die. That's now, Lincoln was one who was prone to tell jokes, but, or think of the aliens that you see in fiction, those little gray guys. I mean, people ask me all the time, what would the real aliens look like? Who knows? I think they'd mostly be machines. Maybe they wouldn't have humor. But if you look at Hollywood aliens, right, they're all kind of smooth-skinned gray guys with big eyeballs and no hair, and usually no clothes. But the facts are they don't smile ever. You never hear them telling jokes. And as a consequence, they're not some species that appeals to you. If they don't laugh, then how can you be sympathetic to them? They are not sympathetic. So there's something very fundamental about humor that kind of, it's more than just the schadenfreude of somebody, slipping on a banana peel, and we all go for that. But there's something else about it that is part of our humanity. And I think I'll tell you a little bit about a theory about why Homo sapiens exists. Why did evolution eventually turn some critters into intelligent critters, by our own definition, of course? And I think that the most compelling answer to that, at least for me, is the one proposed by Jeff Miller. He's a professor at the University of New Mexico. And he said, look, in nature, it's all about producing healthy offspring, offspring that can survive, right? You take the peacock, right? And, the peahens are sitting around with their little pea brains, and a male peacock strides up, and he shows the female these big blue feathers. And, she takes a look at them and tries to decide, well, I mean, yes, no, I mean, is this the one? And you might wonder, well, what's the point of that? And the point is not to impress her with a bit of art. The point is that if he can grow those big blue feathers, which after all attract predators and take a lot of energy, which is to say a lot of food, if he can do that, probably his genetic makeup is pretty good. Not too many errors in his genome, and consequently, the chicks will be healthy. All right. That you see that all across the animal kingdom. And what he's saying is that you also see it for us. That the best strategy, for men, because after all, men are merely a genetic experiment being run by women. I think from an evolutionary point of view, that's undoubtedly the true. And I think that most men realize that. The best strategy for men would be to go to parties and take off their scalps and pass their brains around all the women. Hey, check it out. And, they would check it out and decide, well, would this mate, result in healthy kids? But you can't do that. It's a social blunder to pass your brain around at parties. But what you can do is if you can sing, if you can tell jokes. I'm not actually making reference to the other panel members here, but you notice that two of them have done it and both of them were men. Okay, so the point is by doing that the women can judge, oh, he can sing, or he's pretty funny, or something like that. And they figure that's a desirable quality, not because they want to be amused, right? It's only because they want the kids to be healthy. So it turns out that if you can do that, the chances are that your genome is fairly well wired up. So maybe that's the real purpose of humor. I don't know. I think I would say only the following to sort of wrap this up, because I know it's stultifying at best. And that is, I give a lot of talks, obviously, about our science and how we're trying to find life beyond Earth and this, that, and the other. And you could say, well, that doesn't sound very humorous. And generally speaking, it's not. I mean, you can talk about, the humor in autocorrelation receivers or astrobiology or something, but let's face it, it's minimal. However, if you leaven your presentation with humor, then people pay attention. At least, they'll laugh. And the hope is that the bigger the audience, the more they'll laugh. I think that's a well-known thing about humor, right? That's why we have laugh tracks actually in situation comedies, because if you had a small studio audience, they wouldn't laugh very much. My own personal experience is that when I go out and give a talk, and it's kind of a technical talk, it's at least a science talk, the audience is usually not expecting me to make any jokes. So the first three jokes I make, dead silence, just crickets in the audience, right? But once they catch on, some of them catch on, oh, that was a joke, they begin to laugh at all the others. And in fact, 7 times out of 10, they overshoot and they start laughing at stuff that wasn't intended to be humorous. And all I can say is that's really disconcerting when they're laughing at stuff that isn't funny and is merely intended to inform them. But I think that it does reflect upon the fact that humor is not just a nice thing to have. The way music is just a nice thing to have. Neither one of those are things that are just nice things to have. They're part of our wiring, part of the evolution that produced us. And I'm glad that some of us can exploit it.
Thank you so much, Seth. That was wonderful. I appreciate your thoughts and participation on the panel. So our final panelist is Michael Spencer. He's a professor of theater and performance design at Central St. Martin's in London, in the UK. So thank you for being here and at your evening. For 15 years, he has been responsible for leading the Bachelor of Arts Theater Design course at Central St. Martin's, the Arts and Design College within the University of Arts College London. In 1999, he became the first person in the UK to receive an MA in theater design, which became the catalyst for his teaching career alongside continuing professional practice. In July 2016, Spencer completed his most recent project, Transformation Exchange, a residency in Granary Square, London, attempting to connect those regularly inhabiting a newly created public space to the rapid changes taking place around them. He has also presented at the US Institute for Theatre Technology conferences, represented the UK at the International Organization of Scenographers, Theatre Architects and Technicians Symposiums in Moscow and Riga, and written articles for the Society of British Theatre Designers journal, Blue Pages. So welcome, Michael, and take it away.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, it's quite hard following a scientist who explains why humans exist. Thanks, Seth. Yeah, I'll try. But thanks for inviting me. This year, unlike the real room, the audience real face replaced by my own, which is a bit weird. As Seth might say, I know you're out there, so I'll carry on. First, I'll give my credentials for talking about humor, and then I'll make a case for the importance of humor in these dark times. So I'm speaking from London in the UK, and I teach at a leading arts university in London. Now, there are 2 things in that statement, which means I understand something about humor. One, I teach, and secondly, I work in the arts. So anyone who teaches any subject at any level understands that often what you actually do is stand up in front of younger people to try to engage them, disguising educational material with humor, or as Seth says, you know, you get them to pay attention. In my case, this is compounded by the fact that I supposedly teach art. Now, there's the contradiction, because you can't teach art, and you certainly can't teach it to young people because they define what art is in their own terms. Now, specifically, I'm supposed to teach people how to devise performance, often without a script or even sometimes without performers or a stage in the accepted sense. Oh my God. Things I say are often absurd and embarrassing. Anyway, look, I know something of humor. Well, we're certainly in dark times at the moment. Given the number of people viewing this, at least some of you will probably have experienced or are experiencing a personal tragedy. So I'm not going to tell jokes about COVID, but I am proposing that engaging and generating humor is actually one of the ways to survive this pandemic. So, okay, there are 2 ways to survive it. Firstly, if you have the money, fund the scientists trying to find a vaccine, on the medical staff trying to help the sufferers. And then if you can't do that, well, first do what they tell you, you know, cope with the social and physical deprivations, but then engage and generate humor at every opportunity. I'm going to suggest that we need humor for 4 reasons. First, because humor is protest. Why do we need protest? Because if we're a fairer world, we'd not be in this mess. We are one world and everybody in it is as important as anybody else. So we need to stand up and say what's wrong with our global society through humor. Now, since the 1960s, my subject, theatre, has been a conduit for Western liberal-minded protest against war, the patriarchy, racism, and various other injustices and causes. Great. But arguably theatre, and maybe the arts in general, have become a bit of an echo chamber, confirming the opinions of like-minded people, but actually not really changing anything much. Humor, on the other hand, is a wider demographic and is not hampered by the label of culture. So we get these incredible, influential, politicized stand-up comedians like Trevor Noah, who I was introduced to at CWA last year, early pioneers such as the brilliant Richard Pryor, who was mentioned earlier by Mike, Lenny Bruce, also mentioned, and in the UK, people like Bridget Christie and Stewart Lee. Now, these people and others like them demonstrate that really stand-up is the new protest theatre. You know, humour is the conduit for dissent. So then there's the idea of humour as therapy. Now, a century ago, Freud identified the importance of humour as a way to talk about those things which society suppressed. It's a way to let go of pent-up emotions and tensions. So some people turn to therapists, others to humour. In the UK, we have Bobby Baker, and in the US, you have Ruby Wax. These are two examples of performers who use their own mental health issues as materials to entertain us, laughing at themselves and even at the processes of mental health care. Now, you could argue that all creative activity, including trying to be funny and provocative, is therapeutic. Yes. And certainly in my subject area, performance and therapy are virtually symbiotic. Next, humour is veracity. Well, as we all know, in the Trumpian post-truth epoch, the truth is, to say the least, elusive. Humour is a way of telling the truth, or at least, at the very least, a way of telling a truth, a way of expressing some kind of authenticity in a world which no longer trusts politicians or the media. Humour often observes and comments on things we know are true, but we don't really want to admit that. We laugh at people like Trevor Noah and Stewart Lee because they reveal truths. Sometimes these truths are quite trivial and sometimes they're quite profound. And finally, I'm going to argue that humour is the glue that binds communities together. Humour gives us perspective because it assumes a distance. That's why it can propose truths. Now, do you remember, as soon as this all started, videos began to circulate via mobile phones, ridiculing the idea of social distancing or panic buying. I'm sure many of you have received these. But actually, as Mike said, bad times are good times for humour. And they illustrate our need to laugh in the face of something distressing, so distressing that we don't really know how to laugh about it or how to talk about it. Death, we don't know how to talk about that. So in Freudian terms, humour gives us some relief, or it's a lubricant, as Seth said, that allow us to confront those things that society makes it really difficult for us to confront. So we are allowed to smile, and it's okay to laugh. Of course, it's not okay in the world at the moment, but I would argue that humour has never been more important in order to protest and to reveal truths, to help us deal with things we can't face, and just bring us together in order to survive. So I'll finish by saying, let's encourage and generate humour at every opportunity. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Michael. That was wonderful. I appreciate you bringing in some academic analysis as well as a fellow academic. So thank you so much. And now, before we start the discussion among the panelists, I just want to remind those that are tuning in through the live stream on YouTube that you can submit questions through the Q&A feature on YouTube. And then once I'll receive those questions, and then after the discussion, we can answer your question. The panelists can answer your questions directly. So please go ahead and do that. But now I'd like to open it up for a discussion among the panelists. And just to sort of bring it together, the various different ideas that were posed by the panelists. I mean, first of all, absolutely the relationship between humor and tragedy, particularly in this, the dark times we're in right now, but also in other dark times. Humor is a part of society and a way of bringing us together as a social lubricant, as has been said. Also, what Michael was just saying as this form of physical release, as a way of releasing stress and of sort of feeling like you can sort of let go of some of the stress and tension that's many are feeling, particularly at this time. also the fundamental need of humor as part of our everyday lives. I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And then pointing out the truth. I really liked how you phrased that. And it made me think of this joke that circulating in Afghanistan a few years back, which was that the Americans have watches, but the Taliban have time. And I think in some ways, humor can also be, or jokes can be used almost in a poetic way to identify a particular truth or get us thinking about things that we may be in the back of our head, but not in the front of our consciousness or understanding. And so I'd like to just sort of hear more from all of you about that, and the role of timing. I mean, so much of good comedy is good timing, right? And so not just is it too soon or not for telling jokes in these difficult times, but is there a right time for certain types of jokes, and your thoughts on how to present those. So I don't know who'd like to start, but you can take it away, panelists.
Well, a taciturn panel. I think that what Michael said there at the end about this is a way of revealing truth. This is just another example of that. But what you can find almost anywhere now are jokes that were told by Germans during the Second World War about their own effort there. And they were, if you will, political commentary in 20 words or less. So, that's clearly the case. And the power of that was demonstrated by the fact that if somebody was caught telling such jokes, they were often shot. So, the government recognized that humor was more than a diversion. Humor could be a subversion.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a really good point. The subversive power of humor, particularly in how it's used politically. And I mean, I'm personally, during these times, I've been just collecting all of the political jokes, or not just political jokes, but political comics in various news outlets, just as a way of sort of charting how this attempt at pointing out truths or pointing out the problems with the way, particularly the national government's handling this crisis. So I didn't know if other people were sort of, in addition to Mike, Reiss, you were talking about the jokes that you're putting out there on Twitter, and thank you for that. But are there other ways that people are using humor or putting together jokes or other types of humorous anecdotes in order to address this crisis?
I don't think so. I mean, Twitter is almost all we've got. We got that, social media, but it is sort of inspiring to see a lot of people could just be saying, well, I'll stay off the air till things are going back to normal. And it's great to see Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers and I think Trevor Noah all going out doing comedy, doing fresh material. SNL is going to do a live show this Saturday night because I guess this is what they do. And and I'll watch them and the material is there, but it is a very weird viewing experience to see them telling their jokes and there's no laughter. There's just dead silence. And you got to keep reminding yourself, oh, they're not bombing. There's just nobody there. Or maybe the kids are there and they don't think their dad is funny. But that's it. Yeah, people are putting it out there any way they can. And it's pretty inspiring. I might just let a little of the air out of this discussion. Just because, because I make comedy for a living, I have much more prosaic view of it. And tragedy in times like this are really good for comedy. I made the point. But the fact is just, if you're making comedy, you need something to work from. You need a story that everybody knows and something that's sort of dark and weird or naughty about it. That gives you something to build on. So there's a little bit of shock to the joke you make. And I think of this, yeah, everyone's making great jokes. And I'm very impressed that people are able to go super dark with this and everyone's laughing, everyone enjoys these. And especially, we're living in PC times where, they love to shoot anyone down who kind of crosses some boundary of taste. And I'm not seeing that. It feels like there's a holiday on sort of political correctness with comedies. so yeah, people are making the jokes, and maybe the fact that we're laughing at everything is that this is the rare tragedy. We're all in it together. You know, it's not just, 9/11, whatever it was, it sort of shook up America, but it was New York's problem. You know, if you were in Iowa, that wasn't your problem, or a hurricane. We're all in this, and I guess so we can all laugh at it. But again, the jokes, the fact that we're making a lot of jokes out of this, it just means, hey, we've got a big kind of fresh, kind of hot topic to talk about. And, these kind of jokes were made about Stormy Daniels, something that didn't affect anything, didn't touch any of us. Well, she touched Trump, of course, but, that's the kind of thing we used to be all laughing at. So it just, more than I think, just helping us in troubled times, just, this is the nature of comedy. We just need something, we need a setup we all get, and we need a setup that's sort of dark or funny or weird enough that we're already halfway to the joke, that it cries out to have a joke made about it.
Great.
I was gonna
Go ahead,
I
Lisa.
was gonna say, along those lines, it seemed to me, one thing was, I suppose it's time to amend the idea that laughter is the best medicine. There's got to be something better than laughter. Laughter is the second best medicine. And I was actually really sick this winter. I got pneumonia in December, January, and then this is dark. Then I lost my voice, and I lost it completely for 30 days, which for me was really awful. It may not have been so awful for my housemates here, my family, but for me it was really hard, and it was in the middle of impeachment. And so I once I could talk, I would tell people, the downside was I lost my voice, but the upside was I couldn't scream at the television. And so that was some relief, I suppose, as things were going sideways. And then on, I suppose, a more personal note, when I lost my voice, I had to go in for an exam, and they had to put a camera down to look at my voice box. And, I think, there's a gap between how you think of yourself and how you really are. And I sort of thought, well, I'm over 50 now. I'm not as vain as I used to be. But as the doctor was threading the camera down my nose to see my voice box, on film, on the big screen, was my nose. And I thought, oh my God, my nose hair has even gone gray. So, vanity apparently does not end with that cold and that illness with me. And I just thought that's the most ridiculous case of vanity I've ever heard of in my life. I'm not going to dye my nose hairs. That's definitely on the TMI, too much information plan. But you have to find humor in the difficulties you face, and often that can be even medical when you're going through something that scares the hell out of you.
Thank you. So can the panelists also talk a little bit more about sort of because several of you are in the arts or related to arts fields, like the role of the arts to help facilitate humor in our everyday lives during these difficult times?
Well,
So I know, Mark, maybe you talk about your music.
Well, I appreciated Michael so much. So many of the things you were saying about which certainly I could apply to my world in performance and presentation of a piece and teaching, all those things. I think the same way, Seth, the same way you were describing the kind of anthropological necessities that gave rise to humor in this case, and you mentioned singing and joke telling, and I certainly, of course, it's a no-brainer to look at art in the same sort of way. These are things that spring forth. The reason a child's finger painting is so spectacular is because they're not inventing anything, they're just being, so, and that's why children are also the most hysterical comics there are as well. Their jokes are beyond comprehension. I won't even try and say any more words about them. So in so much as arts are our inheritance from our child selves and the children that continually remind us of that, it is a fuel that will burn bright under any circumstance, because I mean, that's what's kind of blowing my mind right now. All the children I know, and I'm hanging out with them in the park, and we're all apart, but we're all having a great, we're all our friends. And so we're a lot of space, but oh my gosh, of course they're in heaven and they're funny. They're as funny as they've ever been, and they're singing songs louder than they ever have. So I like the idea of let's make humor every day. Let's make art every day. I'm leading these virtual sing-alongs that have plenty of mirth involved with a thing called Guitar Mash Virtual Campfire, and we're trying to get people to do homemade music and homemade revelry. Revelry is where it's at. I like to use the word mirth a lot, because of course there's nothing that compares with a beautiful joke. And Mike Reiss, thank you so much. I laughed at so many of the things you shared from your Twitter, and I have never tweeted or followed a tweet or anything, but I am going to now to follow you. I want that source of fuel as well. But I will say that right now, the mirth making that should be going on, even in absence of the Baba Ganoush, cymbal crash that follows the joke, I think just really just fantastic mirth making and good chuckles, and guffaws. That's where I think art should align at this moment with those kinds of things in households, and that's kind of where I'm putting a lot of my energy right now.
Right.
Go ahead, Michael.
Agree. I would rather hope that I kind of agree with that, but I hope that what might happen as a response to the virus is that we kind of reassess the value of art, because I think in recent years, comedy, humor has been sort of treated as a bit of an inferior genre compared to tragedy. It's almost like we can only make art about serious things, and I don't think art has to be serious. I think it can be flippant and funny and silly, and that's also art. And I think that's not maybe as valued as much as it had been. I mean, when did we last go to an exhibition and have a good laugh? And I'm all for issue-based work. I'm all for work that sort of challenge and makes us think. But I think there's another side to us, and there are other things. And actually, humor and comedy is very difficult. It's very skilled. And to make something funny like The Simpsons, it's very difficult. It takes a lot of work. It's hard work. And I think that maybe should be valued a bit more.
Great, thank you. And one of the questions from the audience, because I want to sort of move to that so we have enough time to get to them all, is can each of you recommend a movie, a comedic movie that could help lift people's spirits during these hard times?
May I jump in? Because
sure, please.
My wife, in all our years together, always just did not get Monty Python. and here we are. She said, okay, I'm in, because we were out on a thing with two children, and I was singing the songs, boldly brave Sir Robin set forth from Camelot, and we were howling and laughing. He was not afraid to die, no, brave Sir Robin. And so she said, I'll watch it again. We got it. She laughed her ass off. We had to watch Life of Brian the next night. So I'm going to say either Life of Brian, which is a perfect movie, I think, or In Search of the Holy Grail.
Great, thank you. Lisa, do you have a...
Like almost every TV writer, I never watch TV. And here I am just sort of being forced to watch TV. So my wife and I took the cheapskate route out, and we said, gee, I think this lockdown's gonna be about 30 days, and you can get Netflix free for 30 days. And so we're trying to watch all of Netflix in 30 days, and it's become a job, but there is so much comedy there that's just been a joy. And Monty Python is one of them. My wife keeps walking into the room going, how much Monty Python is there? Because there's so many specials they have, and recaps and anthologies, and it's almost all really great stuff. So jump into that. I feel like, people of a certain age know Monty Python, but it may have skipped a generation. It's been a long time since, they were essential viewing. So get into that. There's a really funny show on Netflix called Toast of London. I'd never heard of it. I never saw this guy. It really makes me laugh. I recommend, yeah. Michael?
I'd just like to recommend, I'd recommend a TV show, although I love Better Things, but you've probably all seen all that because it's come here and I love that. But I would recommend a TV series that's coming to you soon called This Country, which has been here, and I think it's just been bought by America, which is a kind of the idea of The Office, and that they're making a documentary and the people are aware they're making a documentary, but they're making it about two people who live in an ostensibly very beautiful part of the countryside, but they're teenagers and they've got nothing to do, and it's just about that nothing happens. It's just about their life in this tiny beautiful village where they've got nothing to do, and it's fantastic. So it really makes me laugh a lot, and just about the banality of life, This Country.
I'm gonna break the rules, Jennifer. Mel Brooks is, really one of my favorite writers of all time, and although it may not be PC as it never was, but Blazing Saddles remains one of my favorite movies of all time. And The Producers is always fantastic. But there's some great writing in Ghostbusters, both the women-led version and the male-led version, the original one, and Mean Girls is also a new classic to me.
Great. Any other suggestions?
Well, I have to say the comments of Michael there about humor, crossing the ocean. I made a couple of films, as it turns out, they're low grade, I have to say, about radio astronomy, which is of course a subject replete with humorous possibilities. And the first one I made was called I guess it was The Invisible Universe, whatever. The bosses who actually paid for the film, well, the taxpayers paid for the film, they were kind of against it because they said there's humor in this film and science and humor do not mix. Well, that's not true. And indeed, the most popular thing about that film was the humor in the end. So humor does mix. But I did make one a little bit later that I took to Japan and, fell completely flat. And I was talking to one of the judges, it was this French woman, and she explained in French, she said, humor does not cross the frontier. In other words, it's very culturally dependent. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But, the great exception that doesn't maybe prove that rule is Monty Python, because, they would do things that were completely bizarre, completely bonkers, and that played well in the United States. So, maybe certain humor does cross frontiers. That's maybe a good sign. As far as the things I like anything by the Zucker Boys, Airplane, that kind of stuff. Again, because it's so creative.
Great. Thank you so much for your suggestions, everyone. And that I'm glad you brought that up, Seth, because one of the other questions was, do you think the coronavirus can bring different nationalities together through humor? And have you heard good jokes from other countries?
I think I said a joke. I told my wife a joke that I heard in Israel many years ago recently, mostly because I felt like we were suddenly gaining empathy with some of the people. The joke was essentially, there's a line in Israel, and there's in front of a store, and there's an Israeli, an American, and a Russian in the line. This was in the 90s. And a reporter comes up and he says to the American, he says, excuse me, would you like to comment on the meat shortages? And the American says, what's a shortage? And then he goes to the Russian and he says, excuse me, would you like to comment on the meat shortages? And the Russian says, what is meat? And then the reporter goes to the Israeli, and this is the Israeli joke, say, excuse me, to the Israeli citizen, excuse me, would you like to comment on the meat shortages? What is excuse me? Yeah, it's a good one. So I was telling her that joke because, of course, I was saying I think we're going to gain some empathy, perhaps, with all three of those cultures. So that's a joke way of telling a joke to say, yes, I think something like this will make things funnier. I think more frontiers will be crossed with humor than before.
Another thing universal about this is something you know, as we're all focusing on body counts and infection rates, the most amazing thing to me that you don't hear anyone commenting on is there's so many horror movies that start this way. Oh, virus is out, everyone's in lockdown. And the amazing thing is nobody's going crazy. There's not riots in the streets, there's not looting, you're not hearing about murders, it's not happening here, it's not happening in other countries. Everyone's just kind of sitting tight. And you know, this may be the most inspiring thing I've seen happen in my lifetime, where you sort of see, oh, here's this essential goodness in all people just sort of hunkering down and living with this thing and not going too nuts. So I think that is very touching. And then again, when you talk about art, to see almost every celebrity is out there online doing some concert. Our comedians are telling jokes, putting on shows. Nobody's making money off of this. And it's just that nice reaffirmation that even the biggest celebrities you see, there must be an element of, yeah, let's stay in front of the public. But the other element is they're doing the money is secondary, the fame is secondary. They're doing this stuff because they love doing it and they love sharing it with people. And that's sort of inspiring too.
I read someone wrote a poem about this being this season of love. And when you see the empty plazas, that's really a testament to the act of love, of people loving each other enough to stay home and loving people who they don't know enough to stay home and not infect others. And that was really touching to me. And then on the universality of humor, I've just been so impressed by the advertisements on social distancing coming out of different countries. The videos are so creative, and the songs that people are doing, the takes on other songs as we began this session have just been really great to listen to. There's one called My Corona that's gone around that's really quite good. But the one thing I learned the hard way does not translate are knock knock jokes. I learned that it's not universal and probably not even that great of humor. I was telling my friend Susanna, I said knock knock, and she just stared at me. And I said, no, you say who's there. And so I said knock knock, and she says, who is there? We never got to the punchline, but I recommend all forms of humor universally, but not the knock knock joke.
Right. Yeah, that actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that leads to another one of the questions here, which is, this seems like a new era in times of who is able to put humor into the hands of the masses. Much of it is coming from non-professional observers at home via videos, memes, YouTube, etc. Is this a valid new reservoir of comedy, or is it overtaking the usual stream of professional comedy? Does this newer source hinder or help feed the richness of humor in this era?
Isn't it just the democratization of humor? I mean, because of the technology, anybody can make a funny video, right? To even think that the public wasn't capable of humor is, obviously wrong. So, but in the past, they might not have had a stage. One thing you can say about social media, everybody has a stage.
Yeah.
Agreed. I know so much of at least breaking into comedy, into show business, just involves somebody opening a door and somebody breaks in and then they let their friends in. And it's not, you don't let your friends in because they're your friends, because it's just deadly to let in somebody, or give somebody a job who's not funny because they're your buddy, because then you have to carry their weight, or you suffer the bad reactions. But everybody is surrounded by funny people, and you just need someone to get in. And so I come out of the Harvard Lampoon Mafia. The Harvard Lampoon's been around for 150 years. For 100 years, nobody ever went into comedy coming out of there. A solid century of failure. And then one guy got a job at Saturday Night Live, and he opened the door, and suddenly you can't escape these Harvard Lampoon guys all over The Simpsons, all, the complete staff of Veep and Curb Your Enthusiasm and Barry and all the shows that people like. So that's one. But there's also a Minneapolis Mafia. Joel Hodgson created Mystery Science Theater in Minneapolis and opened the door to guys from Minneapolis. The Onion opened up Wisconsin. So again, you just need access, and it's a great time now that everybody has access. Everyone has a platform. Everyone can get their humor out there.
I can't remember who said it, and I wish I could, because it's a wonderful thing. Music is too important a thing to be left to professionals. And certainly the same can be said of comedy. It's our birthright. I'm fond of saying the word musician is too often used to discourage people from participating in their birthright as sound makers. And it's to be human is to be a sound maker. To be human is to laugh and to want to create laughter. I'll stop there. Thanks.
So another one of the questions from the audience is, so I know you're all here I know all of you are here in public wearing no pants. That used to be a bad dream. How long will it be before we all start having nightmares about exposing our faces in public?
I was actually going to stand up before I spoke just to show people that I did have on,
on like actual pants. Yeah, right.
But I didn't want to embarrass anyone else on the panel who might not be wearing pants.
Yeah, should we all prove that we have pants on?
Pants, I didn't want
those are, I don't know if you, there's Mike, yeah.
Here they are.
Everyone is standing up showing their pants. Wait, Mike, you have to talk so they can see you.
That is not.
So we can revert to you. So Mike has
they are elephant
baggy pants on.
Yeah.
Well played, Mike.
Yeah, well done.
I think there is a new intimacy, though, isn't there? There is a new
intimacy
that is kind of that is happening, because we're all now seeing each other's bedrooms and rooms, and things that we never did before. We are, although we're not sort of physically meeting, in many ways the meetings are even potentially more intimate. This kind of this barrier that is usually between us is to some extent being broken down by this media. The fact that we can be in each other's rooms and we can be extremely intimate actually on screen.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting point, Michael, because I note in the Zoom meetings, I'm working at home like everybody else. And so we have these, endless Zoom meetings. And what I find is happening is that you begin to pay more attention to the background than the foreground. And I noticed that, for example, if you're talking to an academic or something, they turn some of their awards or some of their books, they rotate them on the shelves so that you can see them. And I don't think that's accidental. They're dressing the set. It's like selling your house.
That's great. So actually there's a couple questions here for Mike about The Simpsons. So one was, how does The Simpsons continue to come up with new and fresh topics for episodes after all these seasons? Do historical bad times in both the world and in people's own lives provide a source for episode ideas? And do you have a sketch idea, or is there a sketch idea for Simpsons that has to do with the COVID-19 lockdown?
Yeah, let me just address that in general. It's we keep, as I say, the show is based on human folly, on family and folly, two kind of universal themes. And there's always going to be families, and as long as people do stupid things, we are going to have topics to make shows about. So as I say, the Trump years have been just excellent for our show, and we're doing very well. I should mention too a technical thing, which is, Hollywood is shut down, but you see the nighttime comedians are out there. They can still make their shows, so they're back. The next thing you're going to see, and all you're going to see a lot of next season, is animation. We have not missed one day at The Simpsons during this crisis, because every step of an animated program can be done by telecommuting. So we're still making episodes. Family Guy still cranking out shows. This has not slowed us down one bit. And the next thing you'll see after that is sitcoms shot in front of an audience. There won't be an audience, but it's going to be a show like The Big Bang Theory is very easy to do. They, you know, the last few years of that, they didn't have an audience and they just had limited sets. It was all shot in one room. So it's going to be a lot of comedy before they finally are able to start making drama again, before they can make a Law and Order show where they can go all over the city, shooting on different locations and putting extras in shows. So comedy is going to come out in front for a while. So that the only other thing I want to say about Simpsons is people keep asking, how will the Simpsons handle this? And there's this whole theme going around that, you know, the Simpsons predicted it and we predicted so many things, and it's all malarkey, except for somebody sent me a link to Simpsons predict coronavirus. And I'm watching these clips, and I've not only seen the clips, I helped write them because they're from 27 years ago, and they're about a flu pandemic hitting Springfield. And I mean, it just looks like it's ripped from the headline. So whenever this thing ends, if you want to see something almost kind of scarily accurate, look up, go to YouTube and look up Simpsons predicted coronavirus.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And then a question for Michael Spencer. Is there any way in which humor might not be helpful in coping in dark times?
Well, I mean, I mentioned when I was talking about that some people listening to this might be, you know, undergoing a personal tragedy now. So I think in that instance, humor wouldn't necessarily be appropriate if you're, you know, if you actually know someone who is dying, or if you have someone I heard of today, a neighbor who died and nobody knew because his family weren't there. I think there are times when, you know, you have to be very sensitive to individual needs. That's when it's inappropriate. I don't think that means we should stop having jokes going around or the Simpsons doing. I don't think that at all, because otherwise then we are stopping things, and I don't think that. But I think we have to be sensitive to the situation.
Great. Thank you so much. And then to all the panelists, so since it's been recommended that that Americans stop shaking hands even after the quarantine is lifted, how do you think American social customs will change as a result of the virus? Because we talked a lot about coming together, but how do you think the social distancing will affect our kind of cultural customs?
Well, I've been advocating for years for Live Long and Prosper to be the greeting. I reveal my true Star Trek roots here, but that would be fine with me.
I think those are rabbinical roots, actually. Yeah, that's an old rabbinical sign, but you know, Lenny Nimoy knew that. I think that what's going to happen is the elbows of our shirts are simply going to wear out quicker.
Michael?
They've shown in Europe, the countries most affected, it's Spain and Italy, are the most affectionate ones, big hugging, kissing cultures. And we think of the French as being sort of passionate, but they're air kissing people, and the Germans too. Germans haven't had much problem because they stay away from each other. So I think we're going to get just a little more chill than we've been.
I think we might react in the opposite way and become more touchy after this, because we can. You know, there might be a response, a counter to the fact that we haven't been able to get anywhere near each other, and we actually we relax more about that. I can't imagine it in England, but maybe.
I think people are going to be more respectful of one another's wishes. Even now, when as the thing intensified, I found myself, my wife and I found ourselves saying what anybody is comfortable with, they deserve respect for that. And I think that's going to carry over. I think that when you meet someone and they don't want to shake your hand, you are genuinely going to be cool with that. And there's lots of kissing going on because we miss one another. And I see my friend across the street, and instead of waving, I blow him a kiss. You know, so I think there might be more distance, but at the same time, more affection and more respect.
I also think that the mask situation changes things, and unfortunately there is, you know, are racially disparate impacts of that. My husband and I went to get money at the bank sort of at the beginning of this, and we had on our kerchiefs, and it felt like we were going up to rob the bank because we had bandanas around our face, you know, to go to the outside thing with the teller, and it was super weird. But it was okay for us. But I just read in the paper yesterday that there were a couple of African-American guys who went into a Target with masks on, and not a Target, another mass, you know, big box store, and they were basically asked to leave because they had masks on. And so, you know, I think that this question of how people wear masks, can they wear masks, how people may be profiled if they have a mask, there's gonna be a lot of talking about that. And I'm sure there are gonna be some people who are gonna make big money on fashion masks or something.
Great. Do you have your mask there, Mark?
I do. My wife, I finally learned how to sew, and it's
Oh, nice.
an old sarong from Fiji.
Okay.
This is mine.
That's great. Lisa, let's see your mask.
Here's mine. It's I don't know if I'm on the screen or not, but
Yeah, you are.
okay. Yeah, so this is how I went to the bank, you know. Someone's
That's
got to
great.
invent some glasses with little steam marks though, so that the steam can get out of your eyeglasses.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. Well, now we're getting close to the end of our time here, and one of the other questions was to ask each of the panelists to tell us basically a COVID-19 joke, or a joke,
Oh,
if you can think of one quickly.
I've got one.
Okay, Lisa. go
Okay,
ahead.
now it is a Coke related joke, but okay, so you know, I told you earlier how Charles Koch's worth like $40 billion, and he's doing fine. Apparently, you know, they own Georgia Pacific, the Coke Industries does, and so they are, you know, making Angel Soft toilet paper and you know, Brawny towels. And I just wanted to tell you, I'm going to turn the other cheek and not boycott their toilet paper in this time of crisis. I know it was bad. I
No, that
I
is.
came prepared.
That's funny on multiple levels, I think. Michael, did you have a joke?
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I have one that came around on social media, and it involved a man being interviewed, and the interviewer said, so I'm going to give you a choice. What would you rather do? A, be isolated for weeks with your wife and child, or B, and he says B. So, you know, there's a truth, unfortunately, somewhere there, isn't there? You know, which is why we laugh.
I'll just put out a reminder to all of our Jewish listeners who are having a Zoom Seder tonight to leave a box empty for Elijah.
Yes, that's good.
That was great. Thank you.
I love telling jokes. Somebody sent. I get a lot of people send me, you know, alien stories, and most of them aren't terribly funny, and that includes this one. But it was about a couple of aliens that had come to Earth, and they didn't find any humans. And it turns out that there had been a toilet paper shortage, and they wiped themselves out.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks, man.
That's good, Seth. I appreciate that one.
Well, I don't have a joke. I don't have a joke, but years ago when I discovered the glory of the bidet, and we had them installed in our home, and so I'm way ahead of the curve. You know, I've been championing, and one of our original ones was one called American Biffy, and at the time, so. American Biffy, let's see, American Biffy, spray away from me. American Biffy, the shit that I can't see. I had a lot of other words, but I'll stop there.
No, I appreciate that. That's great. So we only have a few minutes left, and I just, before we end, I just wanted to thank you all for participating in this panel. I certainly enjoyed it, and I hope our audience did as well. And if you have some final words of wisdom and humor for us before we close, that would be wonderful.
Should have gone out on American Biffy.
Busy.
I was just going to say, I suppose this isn't funny, but I'm just really grateful for the Conference on World Affairs for continuing this in the midst of this, and really grateful for all the work of the team behind the scenes and all the planning that went into the event that didn't happen. And, you know, I know it's a lot of work to pull this off under ordinary circumstances, and these are extraordinary circumstances. And so, and also for folks tuning in to make that effort to come in and support the tremendous work that the University of Colorado does to bring speakers together. So just grateful for all of the work of all the people who made this possible, and all the people also out there in the world who are the helpers, the nurses and the doctors and the healthcare workers and the people who are delivering groceries and the truckers, you know, getting people food and supplies. You know, I just think we have a lot to be grateful for.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. Mike?
Ooh,
Oh,
me?
you're on the screen, so.
Oh, here. Oh, that's tough. I didn't know that. No, thanks a lot. Thank you. You know, I was talking about people doing things for free, and one of the miracles of CWA is everybody goes there for everyone does this for free. I sort of had this, my first exposure to the way people are so giving, and the fact that the CWA has been going for years and years, and 200 speakers come in, and you work these people. You work them pretty hard at CWA, giving talks all the time, and then they don't get paid. You don't even cover their travel. I go, what are people crazy? And now I get it. I get it a little more, and that's it. I'll just repeat just the non-funny observation that I'm seeing a lot of goodness out of people, and generosity of spirit, and you know, it's uniting us not only as Americans, but internationally. Everybody's everyone's being a good soldier about this. So thanks, world.
Great. Well, thank you all for your time and presenting here today. And thank you to, again, all the amazing work, as Lisa said, by the CWA staff, and everyone at CU Boulder has really made an effort to continue to do this online. And also to the audience for tuning in and asking some great questions that we could all enjoy listening to each other's answers. I really appreciate all of you for being here today. And I learned a lot, and anyone who's listening into the bios of each of the panelists are also online if you want more information, and also about their Twitter handles or how to follow them otherwise through the internet. And again, thank you all for being here, and it was lovely to meet you virtually, and I wish you all the best.
And you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.